Hello, you're listening to the Shetland Times podcast with me, your host, Marjolein Robertson. And this week I'm joined with Jim Sim. Hi, Jim.
Hi.
How are you getting on?
I am doing great. Nice to be back in Shetland.
Yeah, it's nice to have you here. Thank you for speaking to us, because you're only here for 10 days?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Okay. And could you give a quick and brief introduction to the listeners of who you are and what you've been up to?
Okay, well, name's Jim Sim. I grew up, I was born in Lerwick, born at Gilbert Bain Hospital. When my mum was young, we moved to Aberdeen, and then we came back here when I was a teenager. So I went to Anderson High School, and then my oldest daughter was born here as well. And when they were small, I had a second daughter. We moved to the United States and to Texas from here. When I was almost 30 when I left.
What took you to Texas?
I got an opportunity. I went to college in England for a while, and I met somebody there who was working in a church in Houston. And some of the aspirations I had for doing missionary work in Latin America, he was connected to some missionaries in Mexico. And he offered me a job there in Houston where I would get some training. And it's not that far from the Mexican border, so I could travel and do short-term trips there. And then eventually my hope was to move to Latin America from Texas, but I ended up being there a lot longer than I intended.
How long were you in Texas?
I was there 17 years. My kids are still there, actually. Yes, my two daughters are still living there.
And was one daughter born in Texas?
No, the oldest one was born here. The other one was born when I was in college in England, actually, near Doncaster.
What did you study?
I studied biblical theology.
Oh, wow.
Yes, which I didn't set out to do. But yeah, that's what I studied.
And then, so for the past however many years, you've been working as a missionary in South America?
Yes, yeah, that's right. At the moment, I've been living in Panama, South America, for 3 years. But before that, while I was living in Houston, I didn't know when I got there that Houston has a very large Latino or Hispanic population. In fact, right now in Houston, I think Houston is about 8 million people, something like that, suburban area. There are more Latinos than there are Caucasian people. So I didn't know that when I got there. So my training was broader than I expected, because it was like, such a huge Spanish-speaking population.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And so, yeah, that was an induction that I wasn't expecting.
And how long does training take? Were you training the whole time you were there, or was it an intensive
Well, when
experience?
I say training, it's more like, so when you leave college, right, you come out thinking you know everything, you're ready to go change the world and all that stuff. So when I say training, I suppose I mean getting practical experience, applying what I was learning in college, and being immersed in a culture. Like, it would take some time to get used to Latin culture, Spanish speaking, learn Spanish, those kinds of things. And like I say, Houston had such a big base of Latin population that I was immersed in it. Not totally, of course, it's the United States, but so I got a lot of connection with Mexican people from Central America, stuff like that, and missionary organizations. That was a crucial factor that I didn't expect. There's a lot of missionary organizations in Texas because they're so close to the Mexican border, and Texas has a big Latino population. So I got to connect with groups who I could learn from and sort of follow their model, avoid some ditches, things like that.
So are you fluent in Spanish yourself?
Fluent? No, I wouldn't say fluent, but I don't have to speak English. Let's put it like that. If I'm in Latin America,
That's brilliant.
I can speak Spanish, and I'm good enough.
So where are you based now? Are you still based in Houston? Or?
No. We have our own non-profit organization or charity. The States, they call it a non-profit, and so it is based in the United States, registered there. So many of our donors and stuff are from the United States, and but we are based in a small town called Boquete, which is in the highlands, actually, of Panama. You don't think of Panama maybe having mountains, and so I still kind of get to be, it's tropical, but it's in the mountains, so it's a bit cooler than the rest of the country. So we're kind of rural, Panama, near the Costa Rican border, about an hour's drive.
And what kind of work have you been doing there?
Well, we have a number of different things. It's an interesting situation there because it's in the mountains. It's a coffee growing region, and so there is what they call indigenous, so it's the Indian people that live there in the mountains. That they're the First Nations people that were there. They're called Nobe Bugle, and they live there. So there's a big concentration of them, and then you have Panamanian, which would be Spanish background people.
Yeah.
And then there's a large expat community of mostly Americans, Canadians, and some Europeans. So we do different things with those three kind of different groups. Of course, so it's peculiar in the sense that what you do with each group is very different, because you've got all this wealth from the West, right, that's there. People usually have retired and things like that. And then you've got extremely poor. The no-bay people are very, very poor. They make like $20 a day, if they're lucky, picking coffee beans or doing landscaping work for the rich, or the wealthy. And they don't work every day. And they live in the mountains, generally speaking. So we've got a couple of projects that we're doing, like we built a house for an Indigenous guy, and it would be a shed for me or you.
Yeah.
It's a house for him. So we have another project like that coming up soon. So we try to do stuff that helps those poor people like that. On the other end of it, the expats, a lot of them are retired there, so they have resources, not just financially, but skills that they have. So we try to mobilize them into doing outreach work or getting involved in programs like the house building thing, to get them involved now that they're in a foreign community, to kind of embrace it rather than just be there to enjoy it.
Like a good integration program almost, where they can help one another.
That's a good way to put it. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, that's what it is. To get them engaged in the community, and a lot of them are bored, right? They're retired. They're down there for the weather. After a year or two, they're bored.
Yeah.
Because they've been relatively successful, most of them, with their career, and so they have skills and they're active people, but they've got nothing to do. So we're trying to get them mobilized into doing things like that, and helping us. So that helps us, like you say, integrate.
Do you find any problems between the different groups of folk as well? Is there any issues there where actually integration is a good thing to
yeah, there
work
is a
on?
bit. The biggest problem you would see, sort of, if you want to say, clashes of the subcultures, is between the Panamanians and the indigenous.
Okay.
You wouldn't call Panama a third world country, but it is developing. So that's what I mean. You have this wealth on one side and extreme poverty on the other. So the culture is very much one of, it's not a caste system, that would be putting it too strongly, but indigenous and Panamanian people don't mix very well.
Yeah.
Typically, coffee farm owners, for example, and people that own businesses, they would have the indigenous people working for them at a very low level of income, and there aren't necessarily the opportunities for those indigenous people to get better education, better jobs.
Yeah, I wondered with education as well. Sorry, just to interject, I should have mentioned this at the start, but we are recording this on location in a cafe. Which was funny because as soon as you said the word coffee, I heard a coffee grinder on in the background. But just if you hear any noises in the background, that's just the ambient sounds of recording a podcast on the go. But so we're talking about the indigenous peoples of education and work opportunities. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Yeah, they it's not easy for them. They live in the mountains, so it's and it's hard to picture. If you think of the Highlands of Scotland, I mean, a mountain is a mountain anywhere, but it's tropical, so it's very lush and dense. So you don't even really know they're there, and it's remote and difficult to get through, to get to schools and things like that. So there are things that the Panamanian government has done, and actually that a lot of expats have done, to build schools in what they call a comarca, which is, we would think of as, if you compare it to the US, a reservation. It's an allotted piece of land that they're given, but they're remote, they're in the mountains, right? So they're beginning to get schools and things like that up there, and healthcare, stuff like that. But as long as they're up there, accessing things like better education, job opportunities just doesn't exist.
Is there any feelings as well of bitterness towards the government by them about, the reservations? Are they... Mm-hmm. I was going to say something but want for much better words, like large enough, but when the whole feeling of often indigenous peoples, almost always indigenous peoples have had their lands taken from them.
Right.
Is there any feelings of resentment in that respect?
I couldn't really speak to that much because I've only been there 3 years, so I know some indigenous people. We've done some work for some of them. The impression I get is there is some.
Which is kind of natural. Which
is natural, but they do have a lot of land. They're not squeezed into some small, useless place. But they do have a lot of land, and they do have it's getting better, let's put it like that, but it's still very different to what you would expect in Europe, or the United States, as far as the cultural differences and the mentality between the groups, like Panamanian, let's say Spanish or Latino, and the indigenous group. They're not very cohesive.
No, and sorry, this is another question that might be slightly off topic, but with indigenous peoples, as you say, building schools and medical centres, is there also a push as well for like protecting culture and heritage? Because I suppose there must be I imagine there's still quite strong cultural roots and the language and things.
Very much so.
These are things that are amazing, and you want to make sure that as much integration happens and make sure culture is also a good thing. You want to protect the digital traditions as well.
Right. Well, and there is a lot, and there are many different. I can't remember. I think there are 9 different indigenous groups in Panama.
Okay.
So the one that's nearest to us are called the Nobe Bugle, and they have their own language, which is Guayami. I don't speak any of that. I know how to say thank you. That's it.
Yeah.
And so that is very much protected among some of those groups. What I'm doing is, so you come in as you're a guest to the country. And you have things to bring that can bring betterment. But there's a line you're going to watch the cross where you want to honour their culture and respect it, yet there are some things that need to change, that they're not aware of, that would be better for them, like education, certain healthcare. I mean, it's funny to see, it's not funny, but it's strange to see sometimes somebody your own age that you would make assumptions about, that they would know about hygiene or healthcare. That's why you would get sick if you do that.
Yeah.
And they just don't know. So it's a fine line of respecting them, but knowing that from what we've assumed because of our education system, things like that, that would be helpful to them.
Yeah.
It's not easy
to
walk that line.
No. Do you come across quite a lot of difficulties, or have you ever had to be quite... So I suppose in Panama, is it quite different politically? Have you had to watch your feet in that way?
Politically... Yeah, I think fortunately for me, they look at me like as being Caucasian, you're the white man kind of thing, and they see you and give you assumptions and passes on things because of course they assume you're rich, depending on which you are, compared to them. And they kind of welcome you in the country because you bring resources. And of course, Panama is different to other Latin American countries in the sense that with the canal being there, the United States governed the canal, or built it, finished building it, and governed it for 100 years, more or less. And they use the US dollar for money and things. So they're used to Americans being there a long time. So they're quite ambivalent really to us. Some places you go in Latin America, the kids especially, when they see you, white face, they're really excited. They've never seen that before, and they want to touch it and all that kind of stuff. Panama, not so much, because they've seen white people there for a long time. So they're quite ambivalent, really. They don't hound you for money, which can happen in other places. So yeah.
And prior to Panama, were you based anywhere else in South America?
I wasn't based anywhere. I was based in Houston before, Houston, Texas. But yes, I traveled. I did quite a bit of work in Guatemala.
Yeah.
I traveled several times to Sao Paulo, Brazil. I've been in a couple other countries like El Salvador just briefly, Costa Rica, and I've done quite a bit of work in Mexico as well, around the area south of Mexico City, and a couple of times in the border towns, which is not, I wouldn't be doing that right now. Border towns in Mexico are not, it's kind of a no-go area.
How come? Is that
like drug violence, that has been going on there for a while between the big drug cartels and stuff. So the border towns, are the transit points, right, into North America for drugs and things like that. So I have done work there in the past in some of the border towns, but I wouldn't be going there right now. It's quite dangerous.
That's so sad. That's so sad. How are things as well? Because if you're based in Houston and Texas, although you said there's a large Latin community there, how is it as well? Because I suppose for us, from very just out of it standpoint, we just hear, I wonder how the general public feel about the things Trump's saying about building a wall, and this really
it depends.
Divisive language.
Yeah, it depends. it's divisive, I think, depending on which side of the argument that you're on. There's a lot of people, even Latino people. I have a friend, for example, whose stepfather is Mexican, and he has a ranch on the border, and he likes that talk because he has illegal immigrants coming across his land, and it can be dangerous depending on who it is. Of course, there's a mix of people in any group that's traveling the border, illegally or legally, right? So he's for it, but then there are other, depending on your political persuasion, people who see it as that's divisive and whatever else they want to call it. So you really do have a mixed opinion about that stuff as far as what ought to be done about illegal immigration. If you live elsewhere, it's not a problem. If you live right on the border, it's a problem they've wanted to solve. At least in the time I was there, 17 years, that they've been trying to fix it since then. It's just they haven't come up with a great solution yet. So among Latinos, you have divided opinion the same way you do among anybody else, really.
It's really interesting. I never even thought about that before either. About folk living on the border and what life's like for them with this, trafficking and traveling across.
Yeah, and it's a lot of people. I had a friend who was a border patrol agent. He worked in a helicopter, and he said it would be every night they would be rounding up people, every single night rounding up a lot of people that were crossing the border illegally. And like I said, there's a mix of what type of person that's going to be. And if you live there and it's your land and you're working, it's your family, they don't feel safe. So they want something done about that. And my friend's stepfather is Mexican, but he's a Mexican that was born and grew up in the United States, which there's lots of them all across the border, right? Yeah. They're second or third generation immigrants that consider themselves Americans, but their heritage is Mexican. So they have differing opinion about how that should be handled. Because a lot of them actually still have family in Mexico, that they'd want to be in the States with them. But it's not that simple.
Oh, so it's like divided families as well.
Exactly.
Geopolitical borders. That's really interesting. So, how long have you been in? How are you going back to Panama again?
Yes, I'll be in Scotland for a couple of weeks. I've got another week or so here in Shetland. I'm doing some meetings here in Lerwick at the Steering Hill Hall. And then,
when are they on? Because this is being broadcasted on Thursday the 28th.
So they're Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday morning at the Steering Hill Hall. We're doing some. It's connected to Shetland Christian Fellowship. So it's like, because Christian missionary. So that's my background, how I got started, and all that was there. Yeah. And so they're hosting, I'm hosting it, but it was sponsored by them. Some meetings at the Steering Hill Hall.
What time are they?
They're in the evening at 7 o'clock, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then 9 o'clock Saturday morning. Yeah. Okay. So I'm here for that, and then I'm going to have a few days just relaxing, my wife and I, in Scotland when we leave here. My tour around Scotland.
How is it coming home? Because what you describe is such like a different world. Mm-hmm. I suppose Shetland itself kind of is a different world from the rest of the world. Do you ever get kind of a shock, or just this kind of different sense of feeling when you come home again?
Yeah, a little bit. But interestingly enough, we had some friends from Shetland that came to visit us in Panama, and I had told them on the way, I said, you'll feel like it's a little bit like Shetland. And they were like, really? How's that the case? Apart from the weather, of course it's tropical weather, which means it's warm. We have a rainy season, a dry season, and of course the landscape, jungle, that kind of thing. There's monkeys and parrots and stuff like that. But we live in a small town, so the routine of your day-to-day stuff, you see the same people like you would if you lived in Lerwick, right? Yeah. You get to know people, you go have lunch at the similar places, or you see the postman, so in that respect, it's quite similar, which is a lot, believe it or not, easier for me, or familiar, I should say, than when I adjusted to Houston. 8 million people, traffic, speed, everything's big. That kind of thing. That was quite an adjustment to me. So going to where I'm at in Panama right now it feels more familiar. So when I come home here, it's not the same contrast as it was like when I lived in Texas.
That's funny. That's when I was in New Zealand at the start of the year. I spent quite a bit of time in this town called Westport, which was 4,000 folk. And by the end of my time there, it was like walking in Commercial Street, because you had to stop every 2 minutes and speak to somebody.
Exactly.
And it was lovely.
Yeah, and that's what I have now. I've been there 3 years, so I know people, Panamanians, expats, and some indigenous people too. They see me on the street, they stop and talk. So that's similar. So when my pals came after a couple of days, we were walking through town going to the store, and the guy says to me, "Now I see exactly what you mean. This is kind of like Lerwick," because I kept getting stopped.
Yeah, just that nice kind of close, small community feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and you've worked all different kinds of, how would you say it, like roles as a missionary, with different groups of people as well.
Say that again?
The different things you've done across South America, from building houses, I assume preaching as well.
Yes.
And what other work have you done under the...
Well, it's been quite diverse in the time I've been there. That's been what I was referring to earlier about the training, and you do a lot of different things. You just want to go help people. But as you get a bit older, you start to kind of narrow in on what you're better at.
Okay.
So now, with different experiences, I do training. Like there's a missionary school nearby where I'm at. I do some training and teaching for them, that kind of thing. But what I have done in the past that kind of got me there to that point was we would do a lot of work on the street with marginalized people, a lot like street kids, homeless people, addicts. I was on a couple of boards, like I was a member of a board for a drug rehabilitation place in Houston. I worked with a group like that in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I helped them, and they worked at the time not so much with people who were being trafficked, although I did some training to be an anti-human trafficking advocate in Houston. But I worked with people there that were helping a lot of people in the streets in Brazil, for example. They're involved in, I don't know how you would say it without sounding crass or something, or coarse, but sex industry.
Yeah, you can say that on this podcast.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So there were people that worked in the sex industry. That I had a friend who ran an organization that would try to rescue, for want of a better word, especially women and kids off the street.
Yeah.
He had a shelter for them, and he would try to get them out of that way of life, which a lot of time was kind of passed on from their parents due to poverty, different things like that. A lot of kids wouldn't go to school, and they would just go straight into the sex industry when they were young. So I worked with a guy that, and I would take teams there from the States, people that would come down. Sometimes we would do some medical stuff for them, or we'd just go out in the streets at night. We'd go out late at night and just go around and try and offer them the opportunity to have a home.
That's amazing.
And we would just try to just show them that we care about them.
Yeah.
That we would tell them from our perspective, what motivated us was that God cares about everybody, even the most marginalized or disenfranchised, whatever. And that there was opportunity for them to have a different way of life because God cares about them. And so we would try to do that. So that I did a lot of that stuff in the early years.
Was there a lot of folk doing that? Like, how did you find approaching people? Was there ever like areas of like disbelief where they didn't trust you at first, or didn't
yes, very much so. Yes, very much so. So for me, I always thought I was fast-tracked because I would try to connect with groups that were already established. Like, I didn't go reinvent the wheel. I would try to find somebody that had been doing it locally. So if I was with them, I was trusted on account of relationship.
They know
with them.
you.
Yeah, and I was more helping them rather than pioneering something or initiating a new program, let's say. I try to work with already established groups that were there in country. Let's say it's Brazil or Guatemala. And even in Houston I did some of that as well. So that was a trust factor. But of course these people have been used their whole lives, many of them since they were children. So trusting people is not something that comes easy to them.
No.
So that takes time, to establish that kind of trust. But I worked with a guy who was very effective at it in Brazil. He'd been doing it 20 years. And he's just an amazing individual. And that was one of the high points that when you first start doing that stuff, it's shocking and it's really hard to deal with. But as you get used to it, you work alongside a guy like that, you see how much compassion he had for people like that. And that's a high point to see someone like that be so effective and care for people and help people transform their lives from what is just the most awful circumstances to living what you call a normal life, like me or you would live. You go and you get a job and you're married and have kids and stuff like that. It's quite remarkable to see the differences.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I was wondering that as well, just you talked about seeing that and the amazing change about your job in general as a missionary, like, because I suppose the first point of that is, one of the main points of that is helping people. So there's a lot of job satisfaction there.
There really is a lot of job satisfaction. I mean, when I was younger, when I first started, I would get discouraged a lot because, for example, I'm helping a friend to run a drug rehab. You get success stories, but they're the minority, honestly.
Okay.
When you're dealing with rescuing people from being abused on the streets, everybody that you help is job satisfaction, but most of them don't get that help, so you're always dealing with minorities or a small percentage. It's worth it, of course it's worth it.
Yeah.
Every individual is worth it.
Yeah.
But when I was younger, I'd get really discouraged by the ratio.
Yeah, by the wider
How
problem.
much just heartache you would see. But as you get older, you start to focus more on not what you didn't get done, but what you did get done, because every individual counts. And so to help see somebody's life change like that, it's very satisfying, very rewarding.
That's amazing. And are you going to stay in Panama for a while now? Are you going to keep going back to Panama?
Yeah, our long-term goal is to be in Panama. I had always wanted to be based in Latin America somewhere. Houston became the base, but so now that we're there, we like that because we're, of course, right in the middle of Latin America.
Yeah.
And we can travel from there quite easily.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And do you get asked this a lot, but do you ever have any plans to come back to Shetland?
Yeah, I do get asked that.
Every time you come
by
home.
my mum. My mum doesn't live in Shetland anymore, but my dad and I have 4 brothers, that live here.
Yeah.
But my mum's always trying to get me to come back, at least to the UK.
Yeah, so you're closer to home.
But I don't have any plans at the moment because we're gaining some momentum and some new things that we're doing in Panama. So for the foreseeable future, we won't be back to stay here, but we plan to come back. We'd like to come back every year if we can, because we have family and friends and all that here.
Yeah, it's amazing though. The work you're doing is amazing, and glad someone's doing it, but I'm glad there's folk who are doing it. And like you say, I mean, that every individual you help counts.
Right.
And the more folk that actually take an active involvement with helping people. Is there ways as well that you can tell the public listening to this to find out more information, or?
Yeah,
can get involved remotely.
We have a website, libertyproject.tv, and that's our ministry. That's what we have, and on there's different pages, of course, with different content. But there's one on there about community outreach where we highlight some of the programs that we're doing. Like we call it a Casa project. Casa is Spanish for house.
Yes, mi casa is your casa.
There you go. My house is your house. Yeah. So Casa projects is something that people can get involved in as far as they can donate for that.
Okay.
Or if people have skills and they would ever like to be a part of a team that would travel to Panama to help with the actual building. It's very simple, small buildings, and we don't need a lot of money to build a house. They could get involved in something like that if they wanted to. They could find out some more there on our website.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jim.
Thank you, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, especially when you're only here for a few days. So thank you, and I hope everyone's enjoyed listening to this podcast today. And please do tune in for more. We'll have another one next week, and every week after that. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Jim.
Thank you.